Greetings and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Run, and today we're playing as Maggie. Maggie is one of those characters that you feel as if you're cursed whenever you play as her. You just never seem to get enough DPS, it's just so hard to get a good run going. That's probably just confirmation bias, but of course her having such low speed, at least she had low speed until Afterbirth Plus, and the fact that her sprite seems so big, it just makes her feel very clunky. Of course, since Afterbirth Plus she starts out with a random pill, or at least I thought it was random, but apparently it's always a speed upgrade pill, which is great, because that means that you essentially play with 1.0 speed instead of 0.85, which kind of brings her up to par with some of the other characters which fall on the slower side, but they're still actually fast enough that you are able to dodge. The fact that you get that little boost of speed really makes a difference, in the sense that there are some hairy situations in which you would have gotten hit if you had the old speed, but with a new and improved, faster Maggie, you can get away from those, and she just feels like a much more solid character to play, and actually she's, in my opinion, a lot more fun. Of course, the biggest problem I have with her is still that her sprite is way too big, and for some reason whenever I have a big sprite on my character, it just feels like I can't dodge, and that's probably just me and my perception, because I feel like the center is actually not where it is, because the bigger the sprite doesn't actually affect your hitbox, which means that you're not more likely to get hit, which might seem intuitive, but it's not, at least not how the game is coded. From what I know, at least, so if I'm wrong, please correct me. But with the big sprite, there does come that problem that I just have a hard time dodging. But thankfully, with the speed up, things go a bit better. Of course, as I say that, with her being kind of the slow character that lacks on DPS, we're fighting Ragman on the first floor, and fighting Ragman on the first floor is probably a curse that I wouldn't wish upon my biggest enemies, because it's such a tedious thing to do. He spawns the little spiders, which are not that little, because you have to shoot them 10 times for some reason before they even die, and you have to shoot them, because if you don't, Ragman will start spawning new ones, and when there's like 3 or 4 spiders in the room, or even more, it becomes really hard to dodge, and when he starts shooting his homing shots, you just have no room to actually maneuver, and then you eventually are gonna get hit, which is not something you want to do. So you have to shoot the spiders. It takes ages to shoot them, and just as you finish shooting them, and maybe lay 3 or 4 shots on Ragman, he heals himself and spawns a few new ones, and that's probably one of the most frustrating things, especially with a character that's quite weak early on. Maggie is definitely on the weaker side, at least stat-wise. Most of the other characters have some way to boost their DPS, Lilith has the Box of Friends, obviously Judas just has high damage inherently and has the Book of Belial. Isaac really doesn't have anything special, but he does have the D6, which makes it more likely that he'll actually enter with a DPS upgrade into that first boss, but Maggie is just Maggie, you have some speed at least now, so it's much easier to dodge those shots, and I do feel like it does make a difference, especially against Ragman, because when the spiders kind of jump around, it's because their movement is random, it really does come into practice is how you dodge. And there's a term I've used in the past, which is reactive dodging, as opposed to actually knowing when to dodge, and reactive dodging is most likely when you see a shot coming and then you move out of the way, because you know how fast you move, and then you know that you're actually fast enough to move out of the way of the shot. But if you kind of dodge like you're supposed to, I would say, not really supposed to, but what would probably better is that you know which shots the enemies will have and you dodge in advance, which means that you position yourself in those cases where you know that enemy shots won't hit you. Of course, with Ragman, what that means is you have to be at the end of the room, because his shots actually do extend quite far, and the homing effect is quite strong, which means that their range is seemingly bigger or seemingly lower than it actually is. But Ragman aside, I've been going on for too long, we did have some, this was a very nifty run, and I really enjoyed it because it was a teamed run, and if there's anything I love about Isaac is when you get a team, and that's not when you just get a lot of DPS upgrades, which means a lot of damage and a lot of tears, but when your run is maybe not strong in the traditional senses, but you have other things going for you which make it somewhat unique. And in this case what we got was Transcendental Tears, Continuum I believe, which makes it that whenever a tear passes off the screen, it actually enters on the other side of the screen, and usually that's not that good, but in this case what we have is the Possessed Tears, which I believe is Eye of the Belial or Eye of Belial or something like that. And what this does is, when you pass a shot to an enemy, that shot actually gets converted into a spectral tear, which I believe has increased damage, or not a spectral tear, but the penetrative shots, which means that if you shoot an enemy at one side of the room, it goes through them, I think it gets a little bit of a range boost, it enters the other side and actually enters and kills the enemy which is on the other side, and because the effects are homing when they enter to the other side of the screen, it's much more likely that you actually hit an enemy. So if you imagine it, it's actually like a brimstone shot with, of course, a bit less damage, but a lot more fun in my opinion, because it's just such a unique and novel strategy, I mean not strategy, but synergy, that you just don't really come up often. And I believe, at least from what I've read on the Reddit post, not a lot of people came up with it. So if you actually do enjoy this one, because I really think it's fun to play, we have double the shots, we have the coins, we had multi-dimensional babies which multiplicated our shots, and later on I was actually going for the conjoined transformation, which makes it that we actually shoot from the sides as well, which means that we have a bunch of shots which just enter the room, and you can see it's getting crazy already. It's just gonna get a lot crazier when we actually get later on, and I'll show you the whole fight, the whole combo in slow motion or in regular motion when we get to Isaac. But for the time being, this run was actually really powerful, and I even picked up Explosivo, and Explosivo is an item that's quite debatable. A lot of people don't really like it. In my opinion, it has its uses. I would say that it's an item that I would say it's good, but I also wouldn't say it's bad. I would say it's very much situational. Obviously, if your shot speed is, your tear rate is very low, you won't pick it up, because that means that essentially what happens is some of your shots are Explosivo shots, and Explosivo shots don't really hit enemies as much as you might want them. Of course, it's good when they stick to an enemy and explode, but most often than not, some enemies do end up being invincible, like Hush, for example. A lot of enemies do go in their invincible forms or underground or teleport, which makes them lose the Explosivo shots. So in those cases, it's not very good, and you actually lose a lot of DPS if it isn't high. But in this case, because we're multiplicating shots left and right, we have the conjoined, we have double shot, we have multi-dimensional baby. If we miss, they re-enter from the other side of the screen. It's just a bunch of tears, and of course, with our high luck, it also means that there's a lot of Explosivo shots. And in this case, I believe it's one of those items that just works really well. So everything in this case actually kind of came together. The only complaint I would have is that we didn't get the Lump of Coal, we got Head of Krampus. I feel like Lump of Coal would have been great here, and I feel like if it had it, it would be a bit too perfect. It would almost seem like it was set up, but obviously, just due to variance, there's so many items and combinations that we haven't even seen before, and this is definitely one of those that I don't think I've experienced in my Isaac career as of yet. But that's also probably because Eye of Belial didn't exist previously, and it only starts to exist now. But nevertheless, this is a great loadout for Hush. Even it might not seem like it, because you might say, okay, the Explosivo shots, sure, they stick to Hush, but they fall off because he goes invincible a lot of the time, or, he just starts spawning enemies. But in fact, I believe that Hush isn't... It really depends. Sometimes Hush is really mean, and what he's gonna end up doing is he's just gonna go underground all the time, and you won't be able really to hit him. But sometimes he'll just spawn a bunch of enemies, sometimes he'll fire his own continuum shots. So in that case, we're kind of like Hush, because we both shoot through the walls. And when he does that, he's actually very vulnerable, and when you can actually land like 10 or 20 Explosivo shots at once and make them go all explode, your DPS is quite high. The fact we have penetrative shots also helps against the enemy's response. So overall, this was just one of those runs that might not seem very strong, because you can see that our damage is actually quite low. It's only 5.47, which is only 2 damage above the base damage. But because our tear rate is quite high, I wouldn't say it's super high, but it's quite high, and because we have this crazy combination of just a bunch of shots which enter through the room and go to the other side of the room and somehow meet in the middle, we can actually kill enemies much faster. And you can see this fight, or how this actually goes, when I fight Isaac here. You can see that the tears which go diagonally actually re-enter from the diagonals and then actually hit Isaac. So even the shots that are missing are actually hitting him. So in this case, you can see that it's like us having quadruple shots at the rate, and we didn't lose any tear rate for it. So it's a really, like I said, a really crazy combo that you don't see often, and I'm really glad whenever a teamed run like this comes together, when you get powerful not out of conventional means getting a lot of damage, but when you get powerful because of the items you have kind of combined well together. And the one thing I would like to point out here is that our damage penalty is exactly 5,000, which is, I think, the most perfect thing that I would have wished on this run. Like, if I had the choice of my damage penalty being a bit lower or being 5,000 exactly, I think I would have picked 5,000 exactly, just because it's a much prettier and rounder number. And our overall rank is 79, which is not great. I did play it quite sloppily. My damage penalty is obviously quite high. Again, it wasn't a very strong run, but it's also due to me being a bit not distant, I would just say I wasn't as focused maybe as on the previous dailies, but nevertheless, it's still a good score, it's still a good run, and I really had a blast with it when I actually played throughout. I hope you enjoyed this one, guys, and I hope to see you next time.